So in November of 2022, a group of friends who had a passion for roller coasters decided to start a YouTube channel about coasters, parks, and much more, and they decided to call this channel Coaster Nerds. They started off making edits, and made those for a while before switching their focus to reviews and their thoughts on different coasters. And even though there were challenges along the way, such as points where they got little to no views on videos, or having half their videos taken down due to copyright, they finally have made it to almost 250 subs and almost 90,000 views, and their 100th video. But really, thank you guys so much for everything. We really appreciate all the support you give us, and we will only continue to make content, hopefully growing even more. So for our 100th video, we are finally making a top 10 coasters at our home park, Kings Island. And to make sure this intro doesn't get any longer, let's dive right into this video.
Starting off with the number 10 spot, we have Backlot Stent Coaster. This is an incredibly well-themed family launch coaster that gives kids their first experience with intense forces and speed. Some notable elements are the first and only launch at 40 miles per hour in 4 seconds, along with the intense triple helix that follows it. This element really surprised me, and no matter how many rides I get on this thing, I am always blown away by the very noticeable G's on this coaster. You then go through some lackluster overbanks and turns that don't do much, but you have to remember that this coaster is like a turnaround. It's not supposed to be the best. Then you stop and some neat special effects play, and you see a helicopter and fire effects before going through a launch. That's really just a boost into a tunnel where there are, again, some lackluster turns, but this time they do something because you can't see anything. After this, you enter the most photogenic part of the ride, the blasting out of the fake wallpaper, which, like I said, looks magical. Overall, this is a great themed coaster, and although it usually gets a super long line, it definitely cracks the top 10.
Next up, we have a coaster that has a lot of undeserved hate, which is our number 9 in Vertigo. Now, like I said, a lot of people like to hate on this coaster for it being rough and uncomfortable, but I find it to be a very enjoyable and stupidly intense ride if you know how to ride it. And the correct way to ride it is by pulling yourself as far as you can into that bulky restraint. And if you really yank yourself into that restraint, then you can enjoy this ride for what it is. A short but deathly intense coaster that is amazing to ride with friends. And out of all the coasters at Kings Island, this definitely holds up as one of the scariest. Ascending that lift hill backwards facing down is crazy, and it's a feeling that is unlike any other in the park, and makes it feel a lot taller than the other 110-foot coasters I've been on. And like I previously stated, it's super intense. Actually, the most intense ride in the park, when it pulls around 5 Gs at the bottom of the loop going backwards. And although if I had to pick one coaster at Kings Island to be taken down, it would be this one, there's no doubt it's a fun ride and a good switch up from a normal Vekoma boomerang. Trust me, they feel different. So yeah, if you've only gotten one ride on in Vertigo and hated the roughness, I recommend getting another one, and try pulling yourself toward the restraint trick, because it really brings out how intense and how good of a ride this truly is.
And for the number 8 spot, we have the Bat. This is yet another coaster that gives some quality thrills whilst being great for the family. This coaster is full of compact turns that will make you experience some sharp G's along with a very cool swing effect that the trains give. And let me just tell you how tucked back this ride is in the corner of the park. It is a hike to get to the station, and while it might be a long walk, it tops this by having an even longer chain lift. On top of this, the Bat is almost always a walk-on because most people don't even know this ride exists due to the fact that it's so secluded from the rest of the park. But even though it is a short ride, it never has dull moments, and the shortness isn't a problem because, like I said, it's usually a walk-on anyway. This is one of the only aero-suspended coasters left on the planet, making this one-of-a-kind experience and a solid coaster in Kings Island's lineup.
Now let's get into our number 7 coaster, and to do this we're going to have to go inside. So of course, we are talking about Flight of Fear. And I can already feel some people about to burst with rage about this ranking, but hear me out. The first time I rode this coaster, I thought it was great. The inversions were snappy, the turns had whip, and the launch was just incredible. But after going to Cedar Point and getting on Maverick, the launch just doesn't hit nearly as hard as it should, and everything just kind of feels forceless. But enough with the bad, let's get into the ups of this immersive coaster. First off, it's no surprise that this thing has incredible theming. Just walking in the queue feels like an experience in itself, and King's Island truly went all out decorating the interior of this otherwise ugly looking building. And another thing FOF does for me that no other coaster at the park really does anymore is scare me. I don't care that it's a mediocre launch. Sitting there staring into the void in front of you and not knowing when you're going to launch is terrifying. And I also want to point out that although many people say it's a pitch black ride, I can see perfectly. So it might just because I have impeccable 20/20 vision, but just don't expect a journey through complete darkness. But one downside is the line. The ops are horrible, and the line is always taking so long because it's a GP magnet. Because oh wow, it's inside. Oh wow, it goes super fast and does loop-de-loops and stuff. So I would definitely recommend getting on this ride first, or just skipping it if you've been on it already. So overall, this is an incredibly unique ride that is a little overrated, but truly an experience you can't find anywhere else, except King's Dominion.
Now it's time to go way back to the opening of Kings Island in 1972. When the park opened, it only had a few attractions to choose from, and the star attraction, which still holds up as one of the best coasters at the park today, which is our number 6, the Racer. Now I know it's controversial to be putting this in front of Flight of Fear, but here's the thing. We've talked about how FOF gets stale if you ride any other launch like Maverick at Cedar Point. But with Racer, you expect a graceful floater-filled layout that isn't too intense, but is overall just fun. And no matter how many coasters I go on, Racer will continue to do this. And although, like we said, this coaster is over 50 years old, it is an airtime-filled long ride, and after the recent retrack, it's also a smooth one. And if you go with friends and race, it's awesome. And it's also incredible to see how this coaster always seems to be dueling, unlike other dueling coasters. And finally, this thing never gets a long line and is always less than a 15-minute wait. The only other time I've seen it take up more than 2 switchbacks is during Haunt. But during Haunt, even the Great Pumpkin Coaster has a 30-minute wait. So overall, Racer is an extremely fun, classic coaster, and if I'm going to Kings Island for that day, this is one ride I'll never pass up.
Now we have the top 5, and we are starting it off with the world's longest inverted coaster, Banshee. This is one of the world's greatest inverted coaster, and we are lucky enough to have it at our home park. It has a total of 7 inversions, the most of any coaster in the state. And all of these inversions slap hard, and are a great mix of snappiness, floaty moments, and some great hang time at the end. My favorite of these inversions has to be the final inline twist, because of the crazy out-of-your-seat hang time that it gives. And it may be because I'm not a full-grown adult like some enthusiasts, but the vest restraints don't restrict me, and I have a lot of hang time on this. And I have said this before, and I will say it again, as many times as I need to. Although the classic B&M over-the-shoulder restraints are better, vest restraints aren't that bad. But comment down below if you disagree. But anyway, going back to Banshee. Like I said, there are a lot of different forceful and snappy inversions, such as the loop going around the lift and the very ominous and very marketable pretzel loop, which both deliver strong Gs, and to this day are some of the best inversions I've ever experienced. And I also think that Banshee has an incredible drop that is so snappy and intense that it catches me off guard every time I take a ride on this thing. But one thing this ride gets that it never deserves is a long line. It almost always has a long wait, so I would recommend getting on this or Flight of Fear for your first ride of the day. And although you might get a rough ride, it's probably just depending on your train. So yeah, this ride is great and is overall one of the best inverts you can find. Moving on.
For number 4, we have the coaster that built Kings Island into what it is today, and that is the longest wooden roller coaster in the world, the Beast. And if you know almost anything about coaster, there's almost a guarantee that you know a good amount about this ride. But if you don't, here's some brief history. So this ride was designed by John Allen, the president of PTC, a popular wooden coaster company at the time, who had already built the Racer in the park a few years prior. He worked with Charlie Dinn, Kings Island's construction director, to make this coaster in-house. After they finished, the Beast held the record for the tallest, fastest, and longest wooden coaster on the planet, and still holds the title of world's longest wooden roller coaster, with 7,361 feet of track. It also recently got re-tracked alongside the racer, making it run better than ever. And at the end of the day, while it is a lot of straight track, tunnels, and turns through the woods, it's truly an experience, and I have never been on a coaster that has come close to the feeling that this gives you. And of course, how can you talk about the Beast without mentioning its insane night rides that are even crazier, and is a must-do if you're ever visiting Kings Island. So while this coaster may not stack up to modern rides, it's definitely a classic and will always remain a staple in Kings Island's lineup and their history.
Moving on from Woody to Woody, we have our number 3, Mystic Timbers, a GCI out and back coaster with a sensation that cannot be found anywhere else in the park, ejector airtime. Ooh. However, while this does deliver some great ejector, after you ride something stronger and with more aggressive airtime, such as Storm Chaser or Kentucky Kingdom, Mystic feels weak and not as powerful as it usually does. But hey, at least you can always rely on the laterals it gives. This ride is also like Banshee in the fact that it has a killer drop with insane sustained laterals and ejector, which, in the back row, throws you up into the lap bar and then pins you to the side of the train, and it is just incredible. The rest of the layout is just hill after hill of airtime, and I cannot believe that its top speed is only 53 miles per hour, because if I'm being completely honest, this feels faster than Orion due to the immaculate pacing and the fact that it's so low to the ground the entire ride, and you get to see the trees fly past you. It's also incredibly smooth, and I could lap this thing all day without getting a single pain in my head, which is something I cannot say for the other Woodies in the park. And while the shed may let some people down, I love it, and I think it's a great way to end off this coaster. And at the end of the day, I'd definitely rather have 80s music playing and a spooky monster than just sitting in a normal brake run. And overall, it's a great way to end off this great coaster. Now, let's go on to number 2.
And for our number 2 coaster, we have the B&M Hyper Diamondback. This coaster is your classic airtime machine filled with great floater that makes it one of the best hypers to ever exist. Every element on this ride is great. The first hills give great floater, and the turnaround is pretty fun. Then the trimmed airtime hill is still pretty good. After that, there's an upwards helix that is the best helix in the park. Yeah, I said it. Then there's more hills which all give great floater, and finally the picturesque splashdown. Even the lift hill is great because it is located in the middle of the park, so you get great views of almost everything besides the Beast in the Bat. And the lift hill on this thing also takes so long, like the Beast in the Bat. Man, I didn't know the Beast and the Bat were so much alike. Anyways, the trains are also something I think fits Diamondback perfectly. The staggered seating also looks so good on it, and it is so open. A wing seat feels like you are just sitting on a chair strapped to a coaster. The clamshells also help give this a comfortable ride because, well, they're clamshells. Do I really need to explain anymore? And I'm gonna say it, Diamondback is a back row ride. Some people say it's a front row ride, but for me, it's just back row. The airtime is stronger in the back, and I love getting my arms soaked on the splashdown. After all this, you can clearly see how Diamondback easily solidifies its spot as the number 2 coaster at Kings Island, but it's still not the best because
our number 1 in the park happens to be the tallest, fastest, and greatest ride in the park, the B&M Giga Coaster Orion. And I'm not going to go into too much depth just because we already have a full review on this coaster, link in the description. But basically, while Orion has its flaws, such as having a wave turn that does nothing and should have been a camelback, or the fact that it has a total of 7 elements and can feel short at times, its goods easily cover up for the downs. First off, the drop is sensational and has some of the best sustained floater in the park. The 3 other airtime moments are the trimmed but still amazing floater hill, the reverse dangle dive that gives a lot of whip and airtime similar to the feeling Mystic's first drop gives, and finally the speed hill, which is so sustained and probably the greatest airtime moment in the entire park. So again, watch the full review for our full thoughts, but in conclusion, Orion's speed, height, and underrated airtime gives it the push to be the greatest ride in Kings Island.
And although we put Orion at number 1, the beauty of Kings Island is that your top spot can change all the time. You could go one day and have an incredible ride on Diamondback and make that your new number 1, or have a good ride on Mystic or even Banshee. Because while at Cedar Point your favorite coaster has to be Seal Vengeance or else you're weird, or at how Carowinds, if you don't have Fury as your number 1, you'll get shamed by the public. But at KI, you can have any coaster marked as your favorite in the park, and that's quite alright. So thank you guys so much for making it to the end. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and we will see you later. Peace!